They say Manhattan in winter shows you who you really are. It strips away the carefully constructed life, the nursing license, the Midtown General ID badge, the lease on a studio apartment in the Upper East Side, and what's left is just survival. That was the grim, crystalline truth I learned the night I sat freezing outside Port Authority, pressed against the cold granite, with nothing but my medical bag and the stubborn refusal to call my mother in Massachusetts and admit I'd failed. Failure wasn't a concept I was familiar with. I was a trauma nurse. Failure was a code called too late, a line missed, a life lost. But personal failure, that was different. It felt like a physical rot eating away at my core warmth. What I didn't know as the streetlights cast long, sterile shadows was that across the street, a man was watching me. A man whose very name, Aruri, made district attorneys nervous and whose family had quietly run parts of this city for 3 generations. What happened between us would start with a coat and a car ride, an act of sheer, illogical kindness. But it would end with the kind of entanglement that makes headlines and breaks rules. The descent. The thing about hypothermia is that you don't realize you're dying until you're already gone. I, of all people, knew the stages. First, the violent, uncontrolled shivering that burns through energy reserves, then the numbness, the blissful cessation of pain, and finally this terrifyingly peaceful apathy that's your brain saying goodbye, slowing down to a critical stall. I was somewhere between stage 2 and 3. The shivering had mostly stopped, replaced by a deep, bone-aching stillness. I was a nurse, or I was before Midtown General decided that protecting a surgeon's multi-million-dollar reputation was more important than seeking justice for a dead 14-year-old girl. That was 2 months and 3 days ago. Since then, I'd learned exactly how fast your life can unravel when you challenge the wrong people. I'd stood firm. I'd refused the settlement, refused the NDA, and refused to recant my report detailing Dr. Castellano's negligence during a routine cardiac ablation. The hospital's response had been methodical, brutal, and effective. They had stripped my life down to bone, lost my job, lost my apartment when the severance ran out, watched my savings evaporate fighting a system that was never going to let me win. Every door I knocked on, every recruiter, every hospital, every pro bono lawyer, closed with the same final, echoing click. And tonight, February 12th, at approximately 2:00 a.m., I was about to lose something else, consciousness. The last bus to Boston had left at 11. I'd been 10 minutes late, my phone dead, my Metro card empty. I couldn't move. Every muscle fiber screamed exhaustion, so I sat. What was the alternative? Call my mother and listen to that disappointed silence, the kind that conveyed volumes without a single word. Sleep in a shelter where someone might steal the medical bag that contained my original copies of the report and my nursing notes, the only proof I was ever worth something. No, pride is a hell of a drug. It'll keep you upright even when your body's begging you to lie down. It was the only thing keeping the lights on in the blackout of my life. I didn't hear him approach. The city noise, despite the late hour, was a dull roar. One moment I was alone, watching snow devils twist across the empty plaza in the biting wind. The next, a man was standing 3 feet away. He didn't look like he belonged on the street, even waiting for a cab. He was older than me, maybe 35, with the kind of face that looked carved from granite rather than naturally born, sharp angles, a strong jaw. Dark hair, darker eyes, narrowed slightly as he studied me. He wore a heavy, tailored overcoat that screamed money and a suit underneath that whispered power. Everything about his posture, his stillness said, "Not your business, not your world." "How long have you been here?" His voice was low, gravelly, accented. Italian, I thought, instantly and instinctively assessing him. Second generation, maybe, still carrying the music of the language beneath the American diction. "I'm fine," I managed, the words catching on the involuntary, ratcheting chatter of my jaw. It sounded like "oh, fi." He didn't move closer, didn't offer a forced smile or a patronizing platitude. He just kept watching me with an intensity that should have been unnerving, but was instead strangely grounding. It felt like being assessed by a machine, coldly, clinically, without judgment. "Your lips are blue, your hands are shaking," he stated. "You're showing signs of moderate hypothermia." He tilted his head slightly, confirming my assessment. "Medical training." I blinked slowly, the cold stiffening my eyelids. "How did you?" He nodded once, sharp and efficient, toward the collar of my coat, where the faded blue of my scrubs and the plastic edge of my deactivated Midtown General ID badge were visible. You're a nurse, which means you know exactly how dangerous this is." He paused, his dark eyes unwavering. "So either you have nowhere to go or you're too proud to go there." His observation, perfectly accurate, perfectly neutral, shamed me more than any pity would have. It was the truth delivered without varnish. "Both," I whispered. He nodded again, a single movement that accepted the finality of my answer. Then he did the unexpected. He turned and walked back toward a sleek black car idling at the curb. For a second, the paralyzing dread returned. He was leaving. But then he opened the back door and spoke over his shoulder, the cold air carrying his voice. "Get in, we'll fight about it once you're warm." Into the Aruri world. I should have asked questions. Where are we going? Who are you? My training screamed at me, never get into a strange car in the middle of the night, but the promise of warmth was a siren song I couldn't resist. The moment I sank into the back seat, the heated leather seats were so overwhelming that all I could do was shake violently, uncontrollably, my body's core temperature fighting to recover. The man, I still didn't know his name, said nothing. He simply drove, easing the luxury vehicle through the empty streets with the confidence of someone who owned the concrete beneath the tires. I caught fleeting glimpses of his face in the rear-view mirror. Strong jaw, eyes that stayed fixed on the road, yet somehow seemed aware of everything, including the way I was falling apart in his back seat. "There are blankets behind you," he said after a few minutes, his voice low and steadying. "And water room temperature, don't drink it fast." I fumbled for the blanket with numb fingers, managed to wrap the thick cashmere around myself. Opening the water bottle took 3 tries, my fingers too clumsy and stiff. I sipped slowly, forcing myself to fight the primal urge to gulp it all down. "Thank you," I whispered. He only gave that single, efficient nod. It was his primary mode of communication. Silent, decisive, and final. We drove for maybe 20 minutes. Time felt stretched and warped by the cold and the residual shock. The violent shaking gradually subsided into deep tremors. Feelings started returning to my extremities, bringing with it the sharp, electric pain of thawing nerve endings. I bit the inside of my lip to keep from making noise. When we finally stopped, I looked up. We were in front of one of those Upper East Side buildings that doesn't need a sign, a monolith of glass and steel, demanding attention through its sheer, understated elegance. The doorman, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, opened my door before I could process that we'd arrived. "Mr. Aruri," he said warmly, "terrible night." "Vittorio," the driver confirmed. The accent, the name, the air of quiet command, it all coalesced. "Is my mother still awake?" "She is waiting for you." The doorman's eyes flicked to me with a flicker of concern, but no judgment. He was trained, professional. "Miss, may I help you with your bag?" "I've got it," I managed, clutching my medical bag like a lifeline, the repository of my failure, but also the vault for my proof. The lobby was all marble and subtle lighting. The elevator required a key card, an added layer of exclusivity. We rode up in silence, and I tried desperately not to catch my reflection in the mirrored walls, knowing I looked exactly like what I was, a disaster in borrowed warmth. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse. No hallway, no apartment door, just into the apartment itself. Of course it did. "Wait here," Ivo said, gesturing to a living room that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Vast, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a snow-blanketed Manhattan, furniture that was somehow both minimal and impossibly expensive. I stood there, mortified, dripping melted snow onto hardwood that probably cost more per square foot than I used to make in a week. Then I heard her voice, musical, Italian-accented, coming from somewhere deeper in the apartment. "Ivo, Igrov tardi." Lucia Aruri appeared in the doorway and stopped. Mid-50s, maybe older, with elegant silver-streaked hair and the kind of bone structure that instantly explained where her son got his sharp profile. She wore a silk robe and an expression of immediate, sharp concern. "Mama," Ivo said gently. "I found her at Port Authority, hypothermia, she's a nurse." The woman's expression shifted immediately from confusion to action, the kind of focused efficiency I recognized. "Madonna cara, sit down. No, not there, closer to the fireplace." She was already moving, touching my shoulder, guiding me toward the intense heat radiating from a modern stone hearth. "Ivo, get the guest room ready. And soup, there's minestrone in the refrigerator." I'm fine, I tried to protest, but my voice cracked, betraying the lie. You are not fine, you are frozen. She had both my hands now, examining them with the practiced assessment of someone who understood bodies and vulnerability. I am Lucia Aruri, you are safe here. Something about the way she said it, not as a flimsy reassurance, but as an unshakable fact, made my throat seize up with the first lump of emotion I'd allowed myself in months. Ivo reappeared with thick blankets, moved with surprising speed to build up the fire. His mother wrapped me in layers of cashmere and wool that smelled faintly of lavender and old money. "What is your name?" she asked softly, her focus entirely on me. Priscilla Levit." "Bella, strong name." She settled beside me, still holding one of my hands. "And you were at the bus station because you missed your bus." It sounded absurd, I admitted, hearing the childishness in my own voice. "No family here, no friends." I shook my head. I didn't want to explain, but the kindness radiating from her was insistent. "I lost my job 2 months ago. I was trying to. I thought I could stay, fight it, but everything just." I gestured vaguely at my scrubs, at my whole life. Lucia made a soft, knowing sound. "Sometimes the fight costs more than we can afford to pay." Ivo returned with soup. Real soup, smelling of herbs and vegetables, and a deep, simmering care I hadn't encountered since I left home. He handed it to me without ceremony, then stepped back, maintaining that careful, professional distance he'd held since the bus station. "Sit, Ivo," his mother commanded. "You make her nervous standing there like a bodyguard." "I'm fine standing." "Sit." He sat in an armchair across from us, forearms resting on his knees, watching me eat the soup like it was the most important event happening in Manhattan. "You're a nurse," Lucia said, observing the way I gripped the spoon. "Trauma mostly. I hesitated. I was good at it, past tense, the weight of the words settled in my chest. "I reported a doctor for malpractice. It didn't go well." Something flickered across Ivo's face, a brief spasm of emotion, anger, recognition. Too fast to read, but there. "You did the right thing," Lucia said firmly. "The cost of doing right is high, but the cost of silence is higher." She paused, then added quietly, touching her chest absently. "I know something about this." I recognized the gesture immediately, a patient checking for an arrhythmia. "You have a heart condition," I said without thinking. "Atrial fibrillation," she confirmed. "Controlled mostly, though it acts up when I worry." She glanced meaningfully at her son. "Which is always," Ivo added dryly, "because you give me reasons." But she smiled when she said it, a warm, complicated smile that held years of shared life, exasperation, and fierce, protective love. "A professional hazard." I watched them and something in my chest ached. Not pain, but a searing recognition. This was family, real, complicated, present family. The kind I'd left behind in Massachusetts rather than admit my defeat. "Your hands," Lucia said, pulling me back to the present. "They're steadier now, good." She stood, all grace and purpose. "You will stay tonight, tomorrow we figure out what comes next." "I can't." "You can, you will." She said it with such finality that arguing felt impossible. "The guest room has everything you need. Ivo will show you." He rose without argument, gesturing for me to follow. I grabbed my medical bag, still clutching it like a drowning woman. The guest room was obscene. King bed with linens that shimmered, an en-suite bathroom with a tub that could fit a small party. Clothes were laid out, soft pants, a cashmere sweater. "Those are my mother's," Ivo said from the doorway. "She's smaller than you, but they should work." "Why are you doing this?" The question was raw, escaping before I could stop it. He was quiet for a moment, leaning against the frame, his face shadowed. "My mother has a saying." He paused, his gaze fixed on a point just past my shoulder. "When you see someone falling, you don't ask why, you help them stand." "That's beautiful." "She's full of them." He started to leave, then stopped, turning back. The unreadable darkness of his eyes finally settled on mine. "You were right, by the way, about the malpractice. Whatever happened, whatever it cost you, you were right to report it." "How do you know?" His expression was unreadable again, closed off. "Because people who do wrong things count on good people staying silent. You didn't." Then he was gone, closing the door softly, leaving me in a room that felt like a dream, wearing borrowed warmth. wondering who Ivo Aruri really was, and why his certainty felt like a strange form of absolution. I woke to sunlight cutting through unfamiliar, heavy curtains. The brief, terrifying confusion of not knowing where I was hit first. Then it all crashed back. The bus station, the hypothermia, the stranger, the penthouse. The clothes Lucia had left fit better than expected. The dove-gray cashmere sweater was impossibly soft. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, clean, warm, and marginally human. Voices drifted from somewhere in the apartment. I followed them, my nurse's training making me move quietly. The kitchen was enormous, marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, but it still felt warm, lived in. Lucia stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. Ivo sat at the island with an espresso and a newspaper, reading glasses perched on his nose, making him look unexpectedly professorial and almost vulnerable. "Ah, Bella, you look rested. Sit. I'm making frittata." "I should really go," I started, the guilt of intrusion finally catching up. "After breakfast," Lucia said firmly. "And coffee, Ivo, pour her coffee." He stood without argument, pulling down a cup. "Cream, sugar." "Black is fine." Something flickered in his eyes, approval maybe. He handed me the cup. Our fingers brushed for half a second. The contact, though fleeting, felt electric, absurd, I told myself, just the shock of being warm and fed. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I have in weeks." It was true. For the first time in months, I'd felt safe enough to actually rest. Lucia set a plate in front of me. The frittata was perfect. I took a bite and actually made a sound I wasn't proud of. "She likes it," Lucia said, smiling at her son. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Lucia's hand went to her chest, the familiar absent gesture, but this time her breathing changed. Shallow, controlled, trying not to show it, but I saw it immediately. "You're having an episode." She waved me off. "It's nothing, it passes." "Mama," Ivo was already standing, concern sharp in his voice. "Let me check," I said, already moving toward her, not asking, just doing what I'd been trained to do. "May I?" She nodded. I took her wrist, finding her pulse, irregular, too fast, then skipping. Classic AFib pattern. "When did this start?" "Few minutes ago, before you came in." "Have you taken your medication today?" "Not yet." I looked at Ivo. "Where is it?" He was already moving to a cabinet. I scanned the label, metoprolol, correct dosage. "Water," I said, and he had it ready before I finished speaking. I guided Lucia to a chair. "Sit, head between your knees if you feel faint. Breathe with me. In through your nose, 4 counts. Hold, out through your mouth, 6 counts. She followed my lead. Ivo stood frozen a few feet away, watching with an intensity that would have been unnerving if I'd had attention to spare. "You've done this before," Lucia said between breaths. "Cardiac ward before I moved to ER. AFib episodes are manageable if you catch them early." I felt her pulse starting to regulate. "There, it's settling." "You are good at this." "I told you I was good at my job." Past tense again. Her hand covered mine. "Are good, present tense, Kara." When I finally looked up, Ivo was staring at me like he was recalculating something fundamental about my identity. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It's nothing, just training." "It's not nothing to me." He said it with such weight that I had to look away. After Lucia insisted she was fine, stubbornness clearly ran in the family, I helped clean up. Ivo disappeared into what I assumed was a home office. Business calls in rapid, intense Italian drifted occasionally from the closed door. "He works too much," Lucia said, catching me listening. "Always has, even as a boy. He thought the world would fall apart if he wasn't holding it together." "What does he do?" I realized I'd never asked. She smiled, a complicated expression. "Import-export, family business, very boring." The way she said it made it clear there was nothing boring about it. "I should let you rest," I said, changing the subject. "Only if you stop hovering like a nurse." "Oh, wait," she smiled. "Explore if you want. The apartment is large, easy to get lost." "The fracture point." So I wandered. The penthouse was stunning in that way that spoke of dynastic wealth, not the flashy kind. Original artwork, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes in Italian and English and photographs everywhere. Lucia as a young woman, a distinguished, smiling man who must have been Ivo's father, Ivo as a serious-eyed boy. And then I saw it. A smaller frame on a side table in the hallway. A little girl, maybe 13 or 14. Dark curls, bright smile, wearing a soccer uniform. She held a trophy and looked so alive, so full of possibility. My hand went to the frame automatically, picking it up, and the world stopped. I knew that face. I knew that face not from a photograph, but from a hospital bed. From sterile sheets and beeping monitors and desperate attempts at resuscitation that failed because someone had been careless, because someone had lied. Sophia Aruri, 14 years old, elective cardiac ablation that should have been routine. Dr. Castellano had been distracted, missed a complication, and when her pressure dropped, he'd waited too long to call the code. By the time we got her back, the damage was irreversible. She'd died 3 days later. I'd been the one who held her mother's hand when they turned off the machines. I'd been the one who filed the report that destroyed my career. And I'd never known her last name was Aruri. The frame slipped from my fingers. I caught it just before it hit the floor, but the sound of my gasp brought footsteps. "That's my niece," Ivo's voice came from behind me, carefully controlled. "Sophia." I couldn't turn around, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at that bright, damning smile. "She died 2 years ago, medical error during what should have been a simple procedure." His voice was low, strained. "The hospital said it was unavoidable, complications. We tried to investigate, but everything disappeared. Records, witnesses, evidence, all gone." Not all gone, I thought wildly. I had filed a report. I had testified internally. "Someone did try to report it," he continued, stepping closer. "A nurse, we never found out who. The hospital buried it so deep we couldn't." He trailed off, realizing what he was sharing with a virtual stranger. "I'm sorry, this is a lot to share." I wasn't a stranger. I was the nurse. I was the person he'd been looking for, and I was standing in his home, wearing his mother's clothes, having just helped Lucia through an AFib episode. And I couldn't tell him, because what would happen when he learned the truth? That I'd failed to save Sophia, that my report hadn't been enough. "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice barely working. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you." He was quiet for a moment. "She would have been 17 this year, about to graduate high school. She wanted to be a doctor." The irony was so cruel, so perfectly vicious, I wanted to scream. "I need to." I couldn't finish the sentence. "Bathroom." I fled before he could respond, locked the door, and sank down against it. My hands were shaking again, but not from cold this time. The inevitable confession. I stayed in that bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. Tell him, don't tell him, the arguments circled. If I told him, maybe the Aruri machine could finish the fight I started. Maybe he'd finally have justice. Or maybe he'd blame me for not doing enough, for failing to save her, for filing a report that only managed to get me blacklisted. Ivo Aruri was clearly someone with real power. If he decided I was responsible for his family's enduring pain, even partially, what would he do? A knock came at the door. "Priscilla," Lucia's voice soft with concern. "Are you unwell?" I opened the door. She stood there with a cup of tea. "Come, sit with me." We settled on the couch by the windows. "You saw Sophia's photograph," Lucia said. "It upset you." "You are a terrible liar, Kara," she said gently. "Which tells me you are not used to lying, a good quality usually, though sometimes a difficult one." She set down her cup. "My son, he blames himself, for Sophia. He thinks if he'd pushed harder, been more him, he could have gotten justice. It wasn't his fault." "I know, but knowing and believing are different countries." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "Whatever you're carrying, Priscilla, whatever burden brought that look to your face when you saw her picture, you should tell him. Secrets in this family have a way of becoming weapons." Before I could respond, Ivo appeared in the doorway, his expression tight, controlled anger barely leashed. "I need to go out," he said to his mother. Then to me, "You should stay here today, inside." "What happened?" Lucia asked. "Business complications," he said, softening his tone. "Someone has been making moves, quiet ones, testing boundaries while I'm distracted." He glanced at me. "Then don't be distracted," Lucia said firmly. "Handle it." He left without another word. The apartment suddenly felt colder. Around 3, Lucia excused herself for a nap. Her energy had been flagging, the aphib was still bothering her. I found myself wandering again, drawn back to the library. I was scanning the shelves when the folder slipped from between 2 volumes and hit the floor. I shouldn't have looked, but I was already holding the open folder. Inside were the newspaper clippings about Sophia, and underneath the handwritten notes. Dr. Castellano's name underlined 3 times, lied, covered up, how to prove, and then the recent scrawl, stark and unmistakable, nurse who reported, find her. My hands shook. He hadn't just been looking for justice, he'd been looking for me. Find something interesting. I spun around. Ivo stood in the doorway, still wearing his coat, snow dusting his shoulders. I hadn't heard the elevator. I'm sorry, I whispered, trying to shove the folder back. I didn't mean to. He crossed the room, took the folder from my hands with careful control. You shouldn't look through other people's things. You're right, I'm sorry, my voice was shaking. Ivo, I need to tell you something. Not now, I've had a long day. It's about Sophia. That stopped him. He turned slowly, and the look on his face made my stomach drop into the marble floor. What about her? This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. The nurse who filed the report, I said, forcing the words out. The one you've been looking for, the one who tried to get justice for her. What about her? His voice had gone very quiet, dangerously quiet. I met his eyes. It was me. I'm the nurse who reported Dr. Castellano. I was there the day Sophia died. I tried to save her, and when I couldn't, I tried to make sure her death meant something. The silence stretched so long, I thought the city outside had stopped breathing. You, he finally said. Not a question, but a statement of utter, impossible shock. I didn't know she was your niece. The words tumbled out faster now. I just knew a 14-year-old girl died because of negligence, and no one seemed to care. I filed the report. I testified internally. I gave them everything and they buried it, fired me, blacklisted me. I lost everything trying to get justice for her, and it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Ivo stared at me, his eyes dark with a violent internal conflict. You need to leave, he said. The words were a physical blow. Ivo, now please, I need time to think. Behind him, Lucia appeared in the doorway, drawn by our raised voices. She looked between us, understanding blooming instantly on her face. Ivo, she started. Mama, not now. My son does not need perfection, she said anyway, moving into the room with surprising strength. He needs honesty, and this girl has given you both. She looked at me, her expression compassionate. Go to the guest room, Kara. Give him time, but don't leave, not yet. I fled, my heart hammering. As I closed the door, I heard Lucia's voice, firm and clear, cutting through the heavy silence. The girl you've been searching for just walked into our lives. You can be angry, Ivo, but don't be stupid enough to let her walk back out.